Ryan Reynolds just walked away from the Mint Mobile sale with what looks like a $300 million payday, but when you actually examine the real timeline, the deleted evidence, and the industry fallout that followed the deal closing, you start to see a very different picture. What T-Mobile sold to the public as a straightforward billion-dollar win for Hollywood's favorite marketing genius might actually be one of the most carefully constructed cover-ups in recent celebrity business history. Because here's what nobody is talking about. The deal structure was deliberately opaque. The payout was contingent on metrics that were never disclosed to the public, and within months of the acquisition finalizing, key Mint executives who knew the real numbers started disappearing from the company roster. This wasn't just a sale. This was damage control disguised as a victory lap. Now, before we get into the timeline they're trying to scrub, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. The mainstream media is currently being paid to bury this story, but I'm showing you the receipts they deleted and the context they're too scared to post. Don't let the PR spin win. Join the drip right now. Let's start with what they wanted you to believe. March 2023, T-Mobile announces they're acquiring Mint Mobile, the budget wireless disruptor that Ryan Reynolds turned into a household name with his maximum effort marketing agency. The headline number was $1.35 billion. That's the figure that ran in every trade publication, every entertainment news segment, every financial breakdown. Ryan Reynolds owns 25% of Mint Mobile through Kina Corporation. Do the math and you get $337 million heading straight into Ryan's pocket. The press release was classic Reynolds. He joked that T-Mobile beat out an aggressive last-minute bid from his mom, Tammy Reynolds. He appeared in a YouTube video with T-Mobile CEO Mike Sievert, promising that Mint's $15 pricing plan would remain untouched and that the brand would operate as a distinct business unit. It was charming, it was funny, it was exactly the kind of feel-good celebrity business story that gets syndicated everywhere without anyone asking the hard questions. But here's where the story stops making sense. That $1.35 billion figure wasn't a clean cash payout. According to regulatory filings that most outlets ignored, the deal was structured as up to $1.35 billion. Up to. That's not the same thing as a guaranteed billion-dollar sale. The payment structure was 39% cash and 61% stock, and the stock portion was tied to performance metrics and earn-out clauses that were never publicly disclosed. Translation: Ryan Reynolds and the other Mint Mobile stakeholders were getting paid based on how well Mint performed after the acquisition, and those benchmarks were locked behind confidentiality agreements. That meant nobody outside the boardroom knew what success actually looked like. So when you see headlines saying Ryan made $300 million, what they're really saying is Ryan could make up to $300 million if every single performance target gets hit, and if T-Mobile stock doesn't tank, and if the earn-out clauses don't get renegotiated down the line. That's not a win. That's a gamble dressed up as a payday. And that's where the deleted evidence starts to matter. In the weeks leading up to the March 2023 announcement, multiple industry insiders on LinkedIn and Twitter were posting cryptic takes about Mint Mobile's actual subscriber growth. Several telecom analysts noted that Mint's customer acquisition costs had been climbing steadily since late 2021, and that the budget carrier model that worked so well in the early days was starting to hit a ceiling as bigger players like Visible and Google Fi entered the prepaid space with even more aggressive pricing. One analyst from a major investment firm posted a thread in February 2023 suggesting that Mint Mobile's valuation was inflated and that any acquisition in the billion-dollar range would likely come with heavy earn-out protection for the buyer. That thread was deleted within 48 hours. Another telecom blogger who had been tracking Mint's customer churn rates published a detailed breakdown showing that Mint was losing subscribers faster than it was gaining them in key metropolitan markets. That post also disappeared. When you start to see a pattern of critical analysis getting scrubbed right before a major acquisition announcement, you have to ask who benefits from keeping that information quiet. On one hand, this looks like a textbook PR stunt to hijack the news cycle and position Ryan Reynolds as a business mastermind. On the other hand, the messiness of the timing and the deleted evidence feels way too sloppy for a professionally staged rollout. If this was a clean billion-dollar win, why would anyone bother deleting third-party analysis that questioned the valuation? unless the goal wasn't to celebrate a win, but to control a narrative that was already starting to crack. But that's not even the worst part. Let's talk about what happened after the deal closed. T-Mobile received regulatory approval and officially finalized the Mint Mobile acquisition in May 2023. The press coverage was minimal. No big announcement, no follow-up YouTube video, just a quiet press release confirming that the transaction was complete. And then the executive exodus began. By August 2023, two of Mint Mobile's three co-founders, David Glickman and Rizwan Qasim, had quietly stepped back from day-to-day operations. Their LinkedIn profiles were updated to reflect advisory roles instead of operational leadership. No public explanation, no farewell posts from Ryan, just a LinkedIn update and radio silence. This is where the clickbait title stops being clickbait and becomes receipts. When you see founding executives and key leadership disappearing within months of a major acquisition closing, there are only two explanations. Either they cashed out and walked away happy, or they saw where things were headed and got out before the fallout hit. If they cashed out happy, you'd expect victory laps, thank you posts, interviews about the journey. None of that happened. What you got instead was a coordinated silence that screams non-disparagement clauses and settlement agreements. These are the kind of moves you see when a deal goes sideways and everyone involved is legally required to keep their mouths shut. And then there's Ryan's role in all of this. After the deal closed, T-Mobile promised that Ryan would remain creatively involved with Mint Mobile as part of the deal. He was supposed to continue doing ads, continue being the face of the brand, continue using his maximum effort agency to create the kind of viral marketing that made Mint famous in the first place. But if you go back and count the actual Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds that have been released since May 2023, the number is shockingly low. In the first 12 months post-acquisition, Ryan appeared in exactly 3 Mint Mobile spots, compared to the 18 months before the sale when he was dropping new Mint ads every few weeks, often tied to cultural moments, movie releases, or competitor roasts. The drop-off is massive, and it's not because Ryan got too busy. In that same post-acquisition period, he released multiple ads for his other brands, including Aviation Gin, before he sold that too, and Wexham AFC. He was still doing the work, he just wasn't doing it for Mint. What you're about to hear next is what his team is actually afraid of. There are unconfirmed reports from telecom industry sources that T-Mobile executives grew frustrated with Ryan's marketing approach after the acquisition. The same irreverent, borderline reckless tone that built Mint's brand was starting to clash with T-Mobile's more corporate, risk-averse culture. One blind item posted on a telecom insider forum claimed that a Reynolds ad mocking a competitor was killed by T-Mobile legal before it ever went public. Another rumor suggested that T-Mobile wanted Ryan to tone down the sarcasm and focus on family-friendly messaging, which is the exact opposite of what made Mint successful in the first place. If those reports are even partially true, it would explain why Ryan's involvement dropped off so dramatically. It would also explain why there's zero public friction. When you're locked into an earn-out agreement that pays you based on performance metrics controlled by the buyer, you don't publicly fight with the buyer, you smile, you stay quiet, and you wait for the checks to clear. So here's the real timeline they don't want you to see. Mint Mobile's growth was slowing. Customer acquisition costs were rising, competitors were undercutting their pricing. The company needed an exit, and T-Mobile was willing to pay a headline number that made everyone look good as long as the real payout was tied to performance and earnouts that protected T-Mobile if things went south. Ryan Reynolds and the other Mint Mobile stakeholders took the deal because it was the best option available, but the structure meant they were gambling on Mint's post-acquisition success rather than cashing out clean. The media ran with the billion-dollar narrative because that's what the press release said and because Ryan Reynolds is great copy. But within months, the cracks started to show. Key executives left. Ryan's involvement dropped. The viral marketing machine that built the brand went quiet, and everyone involved is legally bound to keep smiling and pretending everything went exactly as planned. The industry fallout is already happening, but it's happening behind closed doors. T-Mobile is slowly absorbing Mint into its broader prepaid portfolio, stripping away the distinct brand identity that made it valuable in the first place. The $15 pricing plan that Mike Sievert promised to protect It's still there technically, but the promotional emphasis has shifted to T-Mobile's own Metro by T-Mobile brand, which competes directly with Mint for the same customer base. Telecom analysts are now openly questioning whether T-Mobile overpaid for Mint and whether the acquisition was more about eliminating a disruptive competitor than actually growing the prepaid market. And Ryan Reynolds? He's moved on to his next venture, his next brand, his next viral campaign, because that's what you do when the last deal didn't go the way the headline suggested.